It was midnight. The clock struck 12 as raindrops kept falling steadily from the dark sky. On the deserted road, only one car moved forward, David's car. David was on a long journey. After a business meeting in the city, he was driving back, but the road was unfamiliar and stretched endlessly. The car's headlights pierced through the misty rain as if trying, in vain, to cut through the darkness. He turned on the radio, but the signal kept breaking. He checked his phone. No service. No cars. No people. Just the patter of rain and the eerie whisper of the wind. Suddenly, the car jolted and the engine died. David tried restarting it again and again, but it was as if some unseen force had held the car in place. A strange uneasiness crept into his heart. His eyes scanned the surroundings, and then he saw it. An old, worn-out building stood right at the edge of the road. Above it hung a faded signboard, half lit and half hidden in darkness by the flickering of broken neon lights. It read, "Silver Inn Hotel." On the rooftop, a dim, flickering light glimmered like the watchful eye of some ghostly presence waiting in the shadows. David took a deep breath. He had no other choice. No signal, no help, no car. Slowly, drenched in the rain, he walked toward the entrance of the hotel. As the door creaked open, a gush of cold air carried with it a stale, musty odor that filled his nostrils. In the dark lobby sat an old manager at a desk, looking as though he hadn't slept for years. And at that moment, the first question struck David's mind. Why did my car stop right in front of this hotel? The hotel door shut behind him with a heavy thud. Inside, a faint, stale odor lingered in the air, as though this place had been deprived of light and fresh air for centuries. Dusty old paintings hung on the walls. A few ancient clocks stood still, frozen in time. The lobby was lit by a single yellow bulb, casting dim, distorted shadows across the room. Behind a reception desk sat an old man. His face was withered, dark circles weighed down his eyes, and in his trembling hand was a rusted pen. He kept his gaze fixed on the papers before him, but the moment David stepped closer, the man lifted his eyes. That look, it wasn't ordinary. It felt as if he already knew David. There was fear in those eyes, surprise as well, and somewhere, hidden deep, a strange cold smile. "Yes, sir." The old man's voice was coarse and hollow. David hesitated, then replied, "My car broke down outside. I need a room for the night." The old manager fell silent. After a pause, he spoke. "Most of our rooms are already occupied, except—" He stopped. His voice wavered, as though he was hiding something. "Except room number 7. David quickly said, "Fine, give me that one." The old man lowered his eyes. A shadow passed over his face. "My advice, sir, find another hotel. That room isn't right." The rain outside grew heavier, the darkness pressing closer. David replied sharply, "Where else can I go at this hour? Just give me the key." The old manager sighed deeply, then slowly opened a drawer and pulled out a rusted key. His hands trembled as he passed it to David. And in that moment, David felt as though this key wasn't meant to open just a door, but rather unlock an ancient secret, a prison of horrors waiting within. With the key in his hand, David slowly began climbing the old staircase. Each wooden step creaked beneath his weight, as if warning the stranger, "Turn back while you still can." The upper floor was dimly lit. A single bulb flickered weakly, while flashes of lightning slipped in through the windows, casting strange and shifting shadows on the walls. Room number 7 was at the very end of the corridor. Its door was made of heavy, dark wood, scarred with marks of old chains, as if it had once been locked and bound tightly from the outside. David slid the key into the lock. But then, something strange. The door was already slightly ajar. Before he even turned the key, the door creaked open slowly, almost as though someone from inside was pulling it. David froze where he stood. For a brief moment, he thought he heard the sound of breathing from within. But the noise of the rain outside quickly buried the thought. He stepped inside. The room was dark, filled with a musty, suffocating air. In one corner sat an old broken-back chair. The damp walls were stained with large patches of mold, and water dripped steadily from the ceiling. The bed was covered with a white sheet, but it was dotted with strange, dark stains, like echoes of a memory that refused to die. David set his bag on the bed and switched on the light. A pale yellow bulb flickered, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. Exhausted, he lay down on the bed. But just as he closed his eyes, the chair gave a faint creak and moved. David shot upright, his eyes wide, scanning the room. The chair now stood perfectly still. But only a moment ago, it had moved. The air grew colder, sharper. To calm himself, David whispered under his breath, "It's nothing, just my imagination. Only my imagination." But room number 7 was only just about to tell its true story. David turned to his side and switched off the bulb. Darkness swallowed the room, leaving only the sound of raindrops tapping against the window. Only a few moments had passed when suddenly there was a faint noise, like the sound of bare feet softly moving across the wooden floor. David held his breath. The room was locked. He had bolted the door from the inside. Then whose footsteps were those? He sat up with a jolt and quickly switched on the light. The room was empty. The bed, the chair, the walls, everything just as before. He forced a nervous laugh. Probably just the sound of the rain, an illusion. But just as he began to lie down again, the bathroom door creaked and trembled. David's eyes froze on it. First a faint sway, then harder, as if something inside was trying to get out. Shivering, David moved toward the bathroom and slowly pushed the door open. Darkness. The tap was dry, the floor completely empty. But the very next moment, drip, 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 drops of water began falling from the tap. David reached out and touched it. The tap was bone dry. The sound of dripping water was there. Yet in reality, nothing was falling. Cold sweat formed on his forehead. The air in the room grew heavier, thicker, like someone unseen was breathing in it. Quickly shutting the bathroom door, David hurried back to the bed. But the moment he lay down again, he felt it. The bedsheet began to shift, sliding slowly downward, as though invisible hands were tugging it toward his feet. His heart pounded violently. He wanted to scream, but the sound caught in his throat. And then, he saw it. From beneath the bed, a dark shadow slowly crawled out. The dark shadow crawling out from beneath the bed slowly slithered toward David's feet. He froze in place, his body stiff as stone. His eyes were wide open, but no sound would leave his lips. The shadow stopped just inches away from him. Suddenly, the light bulb flickered, went out for a moment, and then came back on. But it wasn't the same anymore. The pale bulb now glowed with a dim red light, spreading through the room like the pulse of blood echoing in the walls. Then, David heard a faint whisper near his ear. "This is my room. You shouldn't have stayed here." A shiver shot down his spine. The voice was neither male nor female, something in between, hollow, cold, wounded. He tried to scream, but his voice was trapped in his throat. His hands trembled, his heart pounded violently against his ribs. And then, the chair in the corner began to shake. Its broken backrest swung forward and backward, as if someone invisible was sitting on it. David's eyes locked on it. And there, he saw it clearly. On the chair sat the faint, shadowy figure of a woman. Her long hair hung messily over her face, her head tilted unnaturally to one side, as though her neck had been broken. Suddenly, the shadow smiled faintly, and then the room filled with soft, eerie laughter. Not laughter of the living, but the kind that rises from the depths of a grave. Before David's eyes, the shadow of the woman swayed on the chair. Suddenly, the walls of the room began to change. The damp stains vanished, and it was as though he had been transported to another time. Room number 7 now appeared bright, new, and spotless. A clean white sheet lay on the bed. Crimson curtains hung by the windows, and the air was filled with a sweet fragrance. David stood stunned. What was happening? At that moment, the door swung open violently, and a young woman entered. Her long black hair flowed over her shoulders. She wore a white dress, and her eyes carried a strange sorrow. She sat on the same chair and began to weep. Then, a man's voice echoed, reverberating off the walls. Do you think anyone will believe you? Who will listen to your words? The woman replied in a trembling, broken voice. I loved you, but you betrayed me. David's heartbeat quickened. He was witnessing everything as if it were a film unfolding before him. Yet he could do nothing. The woman kept crying out. You stole everything from me, my honor, my dreams, my peace. I have nothing left. And then, sobbing, she picked up a rope. David wanted to scream. No, don't do this. But the woman pushed the chair away, and in that instant, the scene froze. Her head hung low, her breath gone. The light snapped out. The room returned to its original state. Damp walls, stains, and a broken chair. But this time, the woman's shadow stood right before him. Her eyes glowed blood red. She glared at David and whispered, You are a deceiver too, just like him. You must die as well. The shadow of the woman stood before David. Red light dripped from her eyes, and her neck hung at a twisted angle, as if the moment of her death had never ended. David began to step back, but the room itself seemed to shrink. The walls crept closer and closer, making it harder for him to breathe. Suddenly, the bulb shattered with a sharp crack, plunging the room into total darkness. Only the woman's laughter echoed now. The chair rocked violently on its own. The bedsheet lifted into the air as if caught in an invisible storm. The wardrobe door slammed shut and then creaked open again. From inside came the sound of nails scraping across the floor. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Something crawled near David's feet. He switched on his torch and froze. Dozens of hands, skeletal, pale, bony hands, were reaching out from under the bed, clawing at his ankles, trying to drag him down. David tried to scream, but no sound came out. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, the hands vanished. And in that instant, the woman's shadow loomed directly in front of him. She lifted her head. Her hair slid aside slowly, revealing a face. Eyes hollow, empty sockets staring at him. Nothing but darkness. A deep, endless darkness. In a chilling, hollow voice, she said, This is my room, and you will never leave it alive. The next moment, a violent force hurled David against the wall. Everything in the room shook wildly, as though a storm had erupted within. And near his ear, a voice whispered again and again, You are just like him, just like him. David crashed against the wall and fell to the floor. His breath came in ragged gasps, as though his chest might burst. The woman's shadow still stood before him. But this time, her laughter had stopped. Slowly, she began to speak. He betrayed me. He drank my blood, and then left me all alone. David's voice trembled as he stammered. Who? Who betrayed you? The shadow stepped closer. Her cold, lifeless fingers hovered just near David's face. Then she bent down, whispering in his ear. He was a traveler too, just like you. He came to this very room, filled my heart with dreams of love, and then took everything away. David's eyes widened in terror. This was no mere accident. No simple suicide. It was a story of betrayal, cruelty, and vengeance. Suddenly, lightning cracked across the sky. The window panes rattled, and for a fleeting moment, David saw his reflection in the glass. But it wasn't his face staring back. It was a stranger. A hard, merciless face. Eyes cold and cruel. The very man the woman had spoken of. David staggered backward in horror. Who is that? The shadow of the woman let out a ghastly, hollow laugh. The one who killed me. He never left this room. His cursed spirit is still here. The air in the room grew heavier, suffocating. Dark stains spread across the walls, like the marks of blood forcing their way through. David felt it, another presence entering the room. From the darkness, another shadow emerged. Tall, male, wrapped in black. His eyes burned like glowing embers. The woman's voice broke, no longer whispering but shrieking in terror. He's back. He's come for me again. Two shadows now stood in the room before David. One was the woman, laughing with a broken neck, her laughter trembling. The other was a man, his eyes smoldering like embers. The air in the room turned suddenly cold. It felt as if time itself had stopped. Then the scene shifted again. Crystal ball, a glimpse of the past. Room number 7 lit up once more. Carpets lay smooth, curtains fresh, and the room smelled of perfume. This time David saw everything clearly. The same woman, young, beautiful, and innocent. Her name was Emily. She had come from a small town, full of dreams, love, and trust. Beside her stood a man, Richard, a traveler, but truly a deceiver. He wandered from place to place, entrapping women with sweet words and then destroying their lives. Emily fell in love with him. He painted dreams of marriage. Then one night, they both arrived at this hotel. Richard said, "This hotel is empty. No one will see us. We'll marry tomorrow." Emily's heart filled with faith. She trusted him. She was happy. But as the night deepened, everything changed. Richard revealed his true intentions. He betrayed Emily, crushing her honor and her dreams. Emily cried out, "I trusted you. You stole everything from me." Richard laughed. "You were only a game to me. I leave tomorrow. No one will be left for you." Everything inside Emily broke. She screamed for justice, but in that empty hotel, only the walls of room 7 heard her. Late that night, she sat on the chair, tears in her eyes, a rope in her hands. Her final whispered words, "This room, this place, is now my revenge. Whoever comes here will die like me." And then she ended her life. Fire David's return. The light died again. The room returned to its original, ruined state. Emily's shadow and Richard's cursed spirit faced each other. Emily screamed, "He killed me, but now this room is the prison of both his spirit and mine." Richard's red eyes fixed on David. He snarled, "You have become part of our story now. You will not leave alive either." David's heart trembled. He realized that whoever entered room number 7 did not come for a single night. They came to become fuel for the two of them, eternally trapped in their endless fight. The moment had come in room number 7 that people had feared for centuries. Before him stood 2 spirits. One, Emily, burned by the fire of betrayal, and the other, Richard, a revenant wandering for ages, bound by cruelty and pride. A strange tremor filled the air. The room's walls seemed trapped in the grip of an ancient storm. The breath of room number 7 had stopped. Emily's shadow stood close to David, peeling back the curtains of the past one layer at a time. David said in a trembling voice, "I understand you were betrayed, but how did Richard get trapped in this room? He was alive. How did he become a spirit?" Emily's shadow slowly lifted her head. White mist spilled from her eyes, and the room began to fold into images of the past. The other side of the past. The night when Emily took her life. Richard was just about to leave the room. He packed his things, slid his wallet into his pocket, and headed down toward the reception. But things turned otherwise. As he descended the stairs, the old manager stood before him. A strange old man with a mysterious gleam in his eyes. He blocked Richard's path and said, "You must pay for what you have done." Richard laughed. "Old man, move out of my way." With anger, he jumped down the stairs and rushed outside. But as soon as he started the car, it suddenly died. He opened the bonnet. The engine was fine, but the car would not budge. Rain pelted down. In the dark, only the hotel's flickering light remained. Richard went back inside. But when he entered room number 7, Emily's body was swinging on the chair. For the first time, he felt fear. He shouted, "This is all a show. No one can catch me." But the room's walls began to close in slowly. A cold, sharp wind pierced through the windows. The room was no longer pristine. The bloodstains looked fresh. A heavy stench filled the air, and silence wrapped everything. Emily's shadow stood in a corner. Not the same sad figure now, but fierce, sharp, and resolute. Richard spat in hatred. "Stop this drama. Get me out of here." Emily stepped forward, and with that step the room began to demonstrate its confinement. The door slowly closed behind him. The lock fixed itself into place. The windows sealed and the light dimmed. Richard pulled hard at the door, but there was no way out. What followed is difficult to describe in human terms. The room became a trap, its center formed by Emily's sorrow and Richard's guilt rotting into a crown of decay. Emily whispered, You stole my dignity, tore my tomorrow to pieces. Today I will do to you what you did to me, but I will call it justice, not a brutal murder." Suddenly, cold chains clinked up from the floor. The chains rose and wrapped around Richard's feet. Not iron chains, not ordinary metal, but chains forged from Emily's tears and memories, strengthened by the power of spirits. Richard leapt and struggled, but the harder he fought, the tighter they bound him. Then a quiet voice rang out. Emily's voice, yet not reproachful or vengeful, but brave and solemn. "I wanted all that he took to be returned, but I did not want to kill, only to bind him where he bound me." The chains coiled around Richard. Not merely physical restraints, but spiritual bonds. Each link embodied his cruelty, each twist the torment of his lies, each lock the weight of his conscience. Richard cried for help, but his voice echoed through the walls and faded, an appeal no one would answer. Emily leaned close and whispered in his ear, "This is your punishment. Now you will become a truth of this room. You shall not die as a living man, nor shall you be free as a dead one." She raised her hands. Every dark shadow, every scar of pain pressed into the room flowed like a current and entered Richard. His face was distorted, his eyes receded into empty sockets. He fell to the floor with a scream, but not the scream of a living man. It was the outcry of his suffering that had never been felt. For a brief moment, the light flashed, and in Richard's eyes the reflection of his former life appeared. The man who had shown no mercy, the promise breaker, the liar, now helpless and alone. Then the light died again, and his voice blended with the room into a faint echo. At last, Emily extended her hand and reclaimed the locket, the very locket she once wore as a token of love. When she took it, she glanced once at Richard and softly said, "I have peace now, but your torment will always remain behind that rotten door." The chains tightened. Richard froze in place, his body there, but his spirit lost. He was trapped inside the room. No strength to leave, no right to relive those dreams. His existence became part of the room, a black shadow that would never guide anyone, only frighten the wanderers who came. David, who had witnessed the entire scene, stood silently, realizing his task was not yet complete. He picked up the locket that had fallen to the floor. It had become a symbol of Emily's life, and returning it to her brought her partial peace. Gently, David placed the locket before Emily and said, "I have not come to avenge you, but I will speak the truth. I will make sure your voice reaches the world." Emily softened at his words. She gave a faint smile and then slowly dissolved into mist. The energy in the room lightened. The chains crumbled into the floor, and Richard's shadow was locked into the walls forever, a warning for all who would come after. David opened the door, stepped outside, and headed toward the hotel's main path. Now armed with evidence and a story he could present to those who sought justice. Summary of the scene. Richard returned, but the hotel never let him leave. Emily's spirit exacted revenge through chains and shadows, but instead of complete murder, she bound him in eternal imprisonment, turning Richard into a ghost, a permanent part of room number 7. David, with the locket and the truth, gave Emily partial peace and took on the responsibility of revealing this secret while remaining alive. And that was the horrifying story of room number 7. Emily's spirit took her revenge. Richard became a trapped revenant, and David was the only living person to witness the truth. If you enjoyed this thrilling story, like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another terrifying and suspense-filled tale.